Let's talk politics for a second, especially ahead of elections next year. The leaders of opposition parties are attending the two-day Moonshot Pact convention in Kempton Park, although I need to stress that name has actually been changed. Well, let's go over to our reporter this afternoon who's been following this since the early hours of this morning. Pule Letshwiti-Jones, hello to you. And you've been speaking to a number of the political parties, but it's no longer the Moonshot Pact. Well, I suppose it is, but there's a much fancier name in place. Give us an idea of what's been happening today.
Well, yes, definitely. The name is called the Multi-Party Charter for South Africa. And we understand that to come up to this name was a big obstacle during the negotiations that took place during the plenary session, which currently the parties are sitting in at this particular moment. The last update we received, of course, was at 1:15 from independent chairperson looking into the talks, Professor William Gumede, who's a renowned economist and of course known for mediation as well, and he did reveal that parties had to deliberate and engage to get to a point whereby they could have a name. Now, you would remember one of the reasons why parties such as the United Democratic Movement, led by Bantu Holomisa, and of course ACDP, led by Kenneth Mweshe, them not joining the then Moonshot Pact was because they were quite disappointed with the fact that the name was pronounced in public before they could be consulted. Those two parties are still not participating in this coalition bloc, which aims to unseat the ANC at the national polls. What we understand, though, is that during the talks or in plenary session, the parties have opened room to say they will now have to speak to other opposition parties which remain outside the process, such as, for example, we understand that there's been a lot of speculation around a likely return of the Patriotic Alliance to join the coalition bloc as well. But this can only rely on those negotiations that will take place. And in order for the multi-party charter for South Africa to be quite successful in these talks, they will have to review their pledge and come up with, of course, a vision which would then speak to the opposition parties to sell them the idea that they have to try and unseat the ANC at the national elections. But I just wanted to take a listen to what Professor William Gumede had to say when we spoke to him earlier on regarding the talks that have been ongoing here in Kempton Park.
So many of the parties wanted a name, because names are, a name is key, because that's the identity. And without an agreement on a name, name was a very big obstacle to get that agreement. So the name that eventually was accepted was a consensus name. So that's one of the robust discussion and one of the points. What are the other issues? Obviously, some issues cannot obviously be resolved in this round of the negotiations, and some issues will have to be moved on to a different round. For example, there are many other opposition parties that are outside the process. How will this core group, engage with many of those parties? What would be the shared values? Although now they've got a vision, makes it easier for them to have a conversation with some of the parties outside.
All right, so there's the new name, formerly known as the Moonshot Pact. I suppose that name will still stick around for a little while, but I suppose we all have to get used to the new title as well. But we're also hearing from, I would imagine, is one of the bigger parties. And I want to be careful how I say that, Pule, because everyone is equal in this coalition conference. But ActionSA certainly have been one of the most vocal parties, haven't they?
Definitely, and I think the DA has learned from their mistakes. You'd remember previously the ActionSA walked out from a multi-party coalition that was in the city of Johannesburg because the DA wanted to field a candidate on the premise that they were the majority in the coalition bloc in the city of Johannesburg. At the time, the ActionSA wanted to field Funzi Ngubeni, but then the DA not agreeing with this kind of move, we saw the then Gauteng chairperson Bongani Baloyi, as well as ActionSA's Michael Bowman, holding a press briefing to say that they will no longer be having a coalition in the city of Johannesburg. So going into this plenary session, these are the challenges that they will have to discuss as to how do they address some of these obstacles which may have the potential not to speak to their vision and, of course, their pledge as well. And they have to compromise, really, to some extent, to find each other, to ensure that they can win the voters' confidence as well. Because during the Gauteng DA Congress, the DA federal leader, John Steenhuisen, was quite adamant that they were not only primarily focusing on unseating the ANC at the national elections, but becoming a viable solution and alternative to the electorate of South Africa. ActionSA has been quite vocal to say they will not take any, sort of stance from the DA to entertain the rumors we're hearing in the public that they are likely to work with the ANC and form a grand coalition if this multi-party Charter of South Africa does not work. ActionSA says it wants transparency. It wants DA to reaffirm itself to say it will be with the coalition bloc throughout, even post the national elections in 2024. So there's an issue around the trust deficit there. But also quite interesting, from these 7 parties, 4 of them will be contesting at the national elections 2024 for the very first time. So you can imagine that there's a lot of ground that they need to work in terms of preparing their constituencies to this kind of block and, of course, vision they would have spoken about here, and, of course, getting them ready for that national election. So it'll be quite interesting to see how things unfold on the road to the national elections. But let's just take a listen to what ActionSA had to say earlier on regarding the rumors around a possible relationship between the current ruling party and, of course, the DA.
We are saying unequivocally to our partners today that we don't want an agreement framed on being anti-anything. We don't want a fear-mongering campaign in 2024. We think this group of parties must come together and offer a positive alternative vision for South Africa, grounded in solutions we share about how we address those greatest challenges in South Africa. That's what we want to see. But we also want to see an unequivocal answer when it comes to the ANC. We don't think it's good that we have political parties like the DA talking about possible coalition with the ANC while these talks are going on, because you can't run with the fox and hunt with the hounds. We must invest fully in this group of parties achieving a majority, and that can't happen if we have parties that have one leg in either idea.
All right, so a reminder, of course, Pule Letshwiti-Jones on that story for us.